I have the honor and privilege of having the Candace Solomon. I'm giving her the new nickname of like New Jersey's mogul in the real estate game. But I'm really excited to have you on the podcast today because I know just you have a lot of insight for us. But Candace, first off, before we dive in, how are you doing? And just thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I am doing well. Thank you for asking.
I'm so glad.
Just excited to be here.
Excellent. You know, what is interesting is, you know, I've had the privilege, I call it a privilege, to basically watch from afar. Like, we've known each other, been connected, you know, on social media for about 2-3 years now. And so I've had the privilege of kind of seeing from afar the elevation. And I've seen from afar, and I know, you know, especially when you see people on social media, it's one thing to see it and it's like, okay, you just talking, versus you see it and it's like, oh no, there's real work being done. And just what you've been able to accomplish in a short period of time has been nothing short of incredible. And so I know it's going to provide a lot of value. So we always start just with this question of, when did you, Candace, start building your dream lifestyle?
Man, when did I start to build my dream lifestyle? The easiest way to answer that would be when I stopped trying to build it myself. We have these like ideas of what a dream lifestyle is, and I think the only way to accurately answer that question about building my dream lifestyle is acknowledging first the fact that the dream lifestyle that I thought was my dream lifestyle is not my dream lifestyle. In all actuality, like, and the older I get and the more life I experience, my dream lifestyle is to be happy, to be at peace, those kind of things. And so, to answer your question, when did I start to build my dream lifestyle? That began when I started to live for myself, and stop trying to live for everybody else and the applauses, the validation, all of those things.
That talk with us about what that looks like practically, because I definitely agree with you in the sense of, when we talk about dream lifestyle, we define that really as a life of fulfillment, where it's not so much about what I'm doing, it's more so how I feel going into each and every day, beyond emotion, where genuinely, how I show up, what I'm doing, who I'm serving, how I'm impacting the world and things of that nature is fulfilling. Talk us through like that process for you, for where it went from, I'm certain, possessions, position, and acquisition, all that kind of stuff, to where you start saying, you know what, let me start letting go of that stuff and really focusing on my peace, my happiness, joy, and all the like.
Well, it got to a point where I had worked so hard and accomplished so much, as they say, the awards and accolades and things like that. And it had gotten to the point where I had always acknowledged God and, been proud of the work that I've done and all of that. But behind the scenes, if you asked me who was Candace, my initial responses would be, oh, well, I'm a mom and I'm a real estate agent, and I'm naming titles. I'm naming hats that I wear. And it's not, well, Candace is a woman who loves to cook. Candace is I barely even knew the kind of what kind of hobbies I had, because my entire identity had become just this compilation of the things that I did, the work I was putting out there, the way I was impacting other people. And it's like, all these things are great on the outside, but who are you? And when it got to the place where everybody was looking at me, oh, she's this great woman, she's so amazing and all of that, but I didn't fully feel that way on the inside, I recognized it wasn't because I was a bad person. I truly did not know who I was. And I'm like, this is not how life is supposed to be. And again, there's nothing wrong with the work I was putting out there. I think it was more so how I was going about it, and not really, tending to me in the process. And so that realization had to follow with, some self-reflection, some inner work, and all of those things to not necessarily change the work that I was putting out there, but change the way I felt about it. And the way I was going about it. And I recognize now that it doesn't feel like I'm doing less, but it doesn't feel as heavy. And it's because there's some true joy behind it. There's true fulfillment. And I know who I am now, in it. And so I have less of attachment to the success of certain things, or how am I going to be accepted, or how am I going to be liked? Like, do I feel good about what I'm doing? If the answer to that is yes, I'm doing it. So I hope that answered the question. Like, what happened, with
Absolutely.
you.
No, it does. It does. Because what I'm hearing is you went from I'm producing, which isn't a bad thing, but you found yourself in a state where you were, we'll just say, misaligned, right? And that's what was causing, like, okay, I'm doing good things, but I feel so tired. It's so heavy, right? But then you found alignment, and that's where you started doing pretty much the same thing. So there wasn't necessarily a change exterior in terms of how you were showing up and how you were working, but you felt a lot better concerning what you were doing. And that's where we talk about fulfillment and everything like that. That's at least, so it definitely answers the question. What I'd love to understand from on your part, number one, is when you started experiencing that inner conflict, so to speak, right? Does that, okay, like, I'm doing all the right stuff, people are seeing it, they're applauding me, but I still feel about it. Can you talk someone through, like, if we have someone who's watching you right now, listening to us right now, and they find themselves in that exact same spot, what would you practically tell them to do? So you mentioned briefly, journaling, self-reflection, but what would be like the number one step? Like, someone comes to you, they're like, Candace, I feel the exact same way, where I know what I'm doing is right, but I feel conflicted on the inside because something's misaligned. What would you tell them to do first?
There's a very spiritual, churchy answer that I really don't think I want to give in this moment, because your question was practical, and I'm not saying that our walk with God cannot be practical. But I believe that before you even, and this is just human Candace speaking, because before I can get to a place where I can even pray or talk to God about something, the very, very first thing is stillness. I need quiet. I need to sit with myself. Like, I need to silence the noise and all of that, because I, I cannot kneel down and pray and try to hear the voice of God or anything like that if there's just a bunch of rah rah. And so if you feel misaligned, you feel confusion, you feel like there's something that, maybe you feel like you're doing things correctly, you're doing things the right way, you're not reaping the results that you saw, or or desired, or whatever the case may be. The very first thing I suggest is solitude, is silence. It's sit with yourself for long enough, because sometimes that silence, there's a lot of answers in silence. Sometimes we think that stillness and silence means that there's no movement, but sometimes no movement is the movement. And we can get into like the hustle and bustle of life and work and all those things, and think that like production and performance is all that life has to offer. But like, we do have to stop and take breaks. We do have to stop and like before you can do anything. At least for me, I'm like, I have to stop everything and kind of backtrack a little bit. Okay, where did I begin to feel the way that I was feeling? Where was I? What was I doing? What happened to trigger certain things? And you cannot do that with all the noise.
That's so good. I think what to go a step further with that, one of the things that I know, at least for those that are watching us, we are usually the answer. We are usually, the people that other people come to for answers. And so within your answer, I'm hearing it's stillness, but in order to make that stillness possible, we have to learn how to say no.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'd love to know from you is, what was your experience like with developing a strong no so you can find that stillness?
That was a journey that I can honestly say I feel like very recently, I'm talking 2026, is when I finally got it, where it's like, Candace, you can say no, and the world is not going to stop turning. Like, it's going to be okay. Because when you're the solution, when you're the problem solver to so many people, you can carry this mantle and feel like, okay, well, if I pause from being the solution to for everybody, the world gonna blow up and it's gonna be all my fault.
Right.
it it can be so heavy. um but to answer your question, um it's tough. It's tough, it really is. I think for me it was just the true understanding that I can't be all that God called me to be, or I can't be my best self if I'm overextending, if I'm always performing, if I'm always, doing. And then honestly, we having a real conversation here. One day I looked in the mirror and I said, Candace, these people picking up the phone and calling you at every minor inconvenience. When something happened to you, who are you picking up the phone to call? And oh my goodness, it knocked me upside the head. I said, Candace, something has to give, girl.
Yes.
Something has to give. And I don't do things because I want things in return or anything like that. But when there's certain sayings like you can't pour from an empty cup, or like there has to be something that is replenishing you. And for me it's God, and all those things, and it's really great or whatever. But when you're living life, and life is very real, it's just one of those things where you have to unapologetically take time for yourself and give yourself the grace that you give everyone else, because the moment you begin to give yourself grace, you'll recognize, you know what, this same grace I was extending to everybody else when I was calling them and they weren't answering, and I was making excuses for them when I needed them and they weren't available because they were tending to their own things and I understood. Let me extend that same level of understanding to myself. And now I do that. And when I can't answer right now, but I answer tomorrow, no, they all right. It's okay.
No, listen, you are hit the nail on the head with that, because, it is true. And I think it's almost this, we can improperly label our role in how things work. Meaning, if I basically take on a savior complex, which is very easy for a lot of us to take on as high capacity leaders and things like that, where you're right, man, if I don't help, if I don't show up, then it's all gonna mess up and everything. It's kind of just one of those things of like, well, number one, at least in my experience with this, I've learned that if I say yes and if I save you every single time, I rob you of an opportunity to develop and grow, because you're right. You calling me for every knick-knack, paddywhack, and every little issue, and I gotta solve it. So me saying no honestly opens up opportunity for somebody else to say yes and become developed. One of the things that I think is interesting is, like you said, when there's a lot of things going on, right? Having the ability to see further than everyone as a leader, because I do believe that helps in our ability to say no to things, where it's like, hey, I'm saying no so I can say yes to a better opportunity later. Uh, and obviously, in the work that you do in real estate, I mean, opportunity is probably like one of those like buzzwords in you all's industry, right? Because it's like, strike while the iron's hot, the market, and all these things. So, how did you properly balance? So, kind of advancing it where it's, you knew what to say no to, but then how did you start identifying the right yeses? Because as things grow, we're no longer as leaders choosing between good and bad. We're choosing between good and great. So how did you start filtering, just your decisions, so that way you would know what you needed to say yes to, what was aligned, and what was actually productive? Like, what was that process like for you?
It's going to sound very cheesy, but I began to operate not like the woman I was at the present time, or and I do this now, so not as the woman who I am now, but the woman that I aspire to be. And so if I'm presented with something and it doesn't make any sense, or not that it doesn't make any sense, but maybe it's not in alignment with who Candace anticipates being, 12 months from now, the answer is going to be no. I'll even give an example. I had someone who presented me with the opportunity of hosting a podcast with them, and I was fresh out of divorce. I was still performing very well professionally, and this individual had a decent following and all of that. So there could have been a lot of exposure potential and opportunities and all of those things, but the podcast was centered around being single moms, divorced moms in real estate, strong, independent woman trying to get to it and all that kind of stuff. And it sounded great. And it fit who I was in that season. But I knew this person didn't know, but I knew the prayers I was praying in private. And I knew that me presenting myself to the world as this proudly divorced woman, don't need no man, and the law. Like it wasn't in alignment with the woman who I wanted to be, with the woman I was praying that God will mold me to be, and all of those things. And so I turned down opportunity. I turned down potential exposure and, other things. The internet loves that kind of content. So it could have been clickbait galore and all of that. But it was an easy no because it was in alignment with who I was at the time. But that was just a season for me. I'm still in that season, but it's just a season. It's not something that I want to attach my identity to. So to answer your question, when it comes to my decision making, I kind of it's internal, but I ask myself, whatever's going to come about this opportunity, or whatever is being presented to me, does it make sense if I'm drawing a picture of the woman who I want God to mold me into, or I'm praying for Him to whatever. Does this thing, the result of this thing, does it make sense? Like, does it even go with this picture? And if the answer to that is no, if I'm not going to feel good about it or anything like that, then it has to be no. And I find peace in my decisions when I make decisions that way.
I think what I heard in your answer that I want to pull out for people as they listen, that really becomes the essence of faith. So you talked about how you made a decision based on basically the best version of yourself, like who you want God to help you become. But then your decision making was corresponded with the prayers you're praying. And I think that's the part of faith that I know a lot of people miss, where faith is more than just I believe it. It's more than just I believe God's going to do it. It's I believe God's going to do it so much that I'm going to align my actions
Mm-hmm.
do what I'm believing him to do. And so, I want to make sure people understand that because, whether or not this shows up in your professional life or whether it shows up in your personal life, like it applies to all areas of just, are you making decisions from a place? And I like how you described it. Are you making decisions for the person that you're becoming, for the person that you want to become? And I think that's important for us, especially, we make so many decisions. I believe what is it? The data says that we make 35,000 decisions a day or something like that. And so it's like, well, how many faith-filled decisions are you making within that time? Now, with the work that you do, I know that it's, some would consider it a hustle, a grind, and all the things. We got that. One of the keys, and we mentioned opportunity earlier, that in order for you to be successful, now we're just talking practical, in order for you to be successful at what you do, you have to not only find opportunity, but you have to be able to create opportunity. Talk with us about how we as leaders, whether we're in professional space, ministry, entrepreneurship, what would you say from your experience? How can we practically create opportunities for ourselves that are aligned and all the things?
Creating opportunities, in my opinion, I believe opportunities meet us where we are. And so if you aspire to do a certain thing, I firmly believe in embodying the type of person who would attract those opportunities, if that makes sense. So I'm a real estate broker, but aside from that, I'm coaching, I'm speaking, I mentor young women, all kinds of things. And so if I want to lean into one of one of those things, like maybe there's a season where I'm mostly leaning into real estate and sales and all of that. But if I am in a season where I want to create more opportunities or explore more opportunities in the speaking space, I'm going to basically position myself as someone who would be qualified for those opportunities, who would attract those opportunities. If I want to speak to young women about self-worth, or women empowerment events, or whatever the case may be, my social media is not going to be anything that goes against that. I'm going to align myself as someone, wow, like this woman is carrying something that I know could be shared with these women, or this woman has something that we know these women will find value in. I'm going to present myself in such a way that's going to align me or make those opportunities make sense. And then on the other side, and this applies for me in real estate too, when it comes to creating opportunities, I look for problems. I know we talked about being solutions and problem solvers, but in real estate, and I was just telling my company this last week, we're not just agents, we're problem solvers. And so if you are in a space where you're lacking opportunity, you're looking for the clients, you're looking for the, whatever, find the people that you want to serve, identify the problems they have, and solve those problems. You can create opportunities by just presenting yourself as a solution to something that people are regularly dealing with.
Ooh, that's so good. I'm taking all those notes. Present yourself as a solution. I really like that because, again, I think that becomes where we go from, we can call it really good workers to actually like effective leaders because, again, we're productive. We know how to get stuff done. We are the problem solvers, but what is the undertone of that is when problems are presented to us. Whereas what you're saying, if I'm understanding you properly, it's let's take the time to think through just what problems can we go find as opposed to, we'll just solve only the problems that are presented to us. And so that was one part of it, looking for problems. But then you spoke about becoming the person. Now, I'm certain you've heard of the be do have principle. I'm certain of that.
Mm-hmm.
But can we break that down for a second? Because that basically is what you're describing here. You want to be the person before you can do the thing, before you can have the possession, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to make sure I ask this succinctly. How does someone identify, okay, I need to become the person? But then, similar to what I asked you earlier, where does someone start? So it's like, okay, I know who I need to become. Where do they start?
Hmm. The best way I think anybody should start with anywhere that they're going to go, and this is where I believe in community and leadership and mentorship and all of that, which is something that I leaned into a couple years ago and I believe has shifted a lot of things in my life. But I began to kind of search for people, not to mimic them or to copy them or anything, but I began to seek out people who had either been where I'm trying to go, they're there where where I want to be, and I not necessarily stalking, but you're doing your research in the thing, and you can't be afraid of that. You can't be afraid of that. But I do believe in mentorship and community and submission to leadership. But I believe that the first thing anybody can do practically is if there's somewhere that where you want to go, and a lot of times we want to go places, experience things that the people that are our circle, our family, our community haven't gone. And so there is a certain sense of ignorance and unknowing because you don't know what you don't know. And so that's exactly why I believe in mentorship and seeking out people who are in those spaces. What can you learn from them? What are some things that you can observe? If you follow someone long enough and they're transparent enough, you can sometimes see their pitfalls. Where did they mess up? And they can kind of, my mentor says all the time, girl, I walk so that you can run. And that's exactly what I've been doing. Thank you, girl, for walking.
Real
Because
talk.
now I'm
Yeah.
running.
That's so good. That makes me think of one of the greatest things that any coach, mentor, whatever, anyone who's like pouring into you, been there, done that, they should give you speed, right? They should give you some measure of speed because what they did in decades, they should be able to give it to you in a way where you're able to do it in days. What stops someone from really properly engaging with a mentor? What stops someone from taking that step, like you said, of finding what I call a success model? Like, what do you believe are like some obstacles that you've seen in your experience or that you experience yourself? But like, what are some obstacles that kind of stop us from finding people who are basically who we believe that we're called to be? Like, they're in that same vein.
Fear, um, fear, insecurity. I had another one too that popped up as soon as you asked me that question, but those are two big things.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we can stand in our own way. Sometimes we stunt our own growth. Before we're even given a no, we plant the seed of no within us. And sometimes it's not done. There's no ill will or anything like that. Some of us plant the seed of no so that if we hear the no, it'll hurt a little less. But I think the reality of the thing is sometimes we plant the seed of no, we allow that no to grow, and then no is just no. And friend, you ain't even tried. Like you didn't even try. You didn't know that this person would have been willing to give you a yes. This person, my mentor, first time I ever saw her was on TV. She was on a reality show. Now, homegirl FaceTime me on a random Tuesday, asking me what I'm doing. And it's just one of those things where you have to be audacious enough. We use the word, audacity and stuff in like a negative light. But me in my life, I'm very audacious. I feel like there's nothing I can't do. Like if like if I want to go and build an airplane outside in my backyard later, like I may start. Like I'm just one of those people that are just very audacious, and I think we lack that. Sometimes we feel as if we're not qualified. Why would this person invest time into me? Why would they, and it's one of those things where it's a self-worth thing. It's one of those things where we doubt ourselves because we don't see our potential. But the reality of it is, if you don't see it within yourself, it's going to be very hard for someone else to see it in you. And so you do have to, everything is going to bring me back to solitude and silence and self-worth, self-realization, all of those things, because until you see it for yourself, it's going to be a lot harder for other people to see. I've been coaching other agents for a couple years now, and I tell them, like, my mentees will tell anybody. Candace tells us straight up that she can't want it for us more than we want it for ourselves. And there's like some truth in that, because if I see greatness in you, me and my sight and my prayers and all that is only going to go but so far if you're not doing the work to align with the prayers and the things that I'm seeing. And you're not going to do the work if you don't see what I see within yourself. So, yeah.
So true. I love that. And I think one of the things in our previous conversation as we were preparing for this, I think is it fits right in here, is when you spoke about your experience that people saw the greatness in you before you necessarily did. And it was in them seeing it in you that you started to believe it. But you found yourself having to break out of, we'll call it like a box of false humility. Walk us through that, because I think that even is an interesting space that some of us may find ourselves in, where we got people complimenting us and we're like, I didn't even do anything. It's not that big a deal. Like, why me? It's I didn't do anything that much. Whatever. Talk with us about how we break out of that box of false humility.
Mm-hmm. False humility is tricky too, because a lot of times we blanket that as like faith, or we're just humble, or like no, you're actually like really insecure wearing a clergy collar. Like
Literally.
that's really what you're doing. Like that's really what you're doing. But for me, the biggest thing was, and to quickly recap it, since the people were not here for our previous conversation, but I was telling you about how people would acknowledge, oh, you're just so amazing and rah rah rah, and I was just like, okay, like it really wasn't it really wasn't clicking for me. Sometimes it still doesn't, but it wasn't until the people that I admire. Earlier, I spoke about, mentors and people that you admire in spaces that in rooms that you haven't yet stepped foot in yet. But there were people in those rooms who were like, Candace, like, you really doing your thing. And I'm like, me, little Candace, like, really? And it's one of those things where I'm losing the question too. But it's one of those things where I kind of just had to realize, like, I always knew that there was something on the inside of me, but for some reason, I just felt like, I wasn't qualified, or I wasn't ready to, release whatever that was.
Yeah.
Um,
And so
yeah.
how did you break out of that box? So with that, it's like you had a knowing. It's a great book that just came out that with that title, but you had a knowing that, okay,
Uh-huh.
there's more in me. How did you break out of that box to really become?
One thing I will say is, my mentor is a huge reason, like, a huge driving force behind what forced me out. And I'll word it exactly that. I don't believe that um, in a sense, I kind of did, but I didn't like emerge out of this cocoon. Like, well, like God's like, I have arrived. Like it's here. It's me. She kind of just like threw me to the wolves. Like, girl, you're gonna coach. Like it's just like you're gonna you're gonna literally like announced it to everybody, and like people were coming up to me like, "Oh my gosh, you didn't even tell us that like you were being offered this position." I'm like, "Y'all, I found out when y'all found out." Like
Right.
it was just one of those, it was just one of
Yeah.
those things. But being ready for opportunities, like being prepared for them. You may not feel like you're qualified for them, but I do think that some of the best people who encounter opportunities and they're ready to like to seize them when they're presented, they're people that do the prep work before the opportunity comes. And so I was one of those people where did I think I was do I think I'm qualified to coach hundreds of agents nationwide? One girl just told me she in Europe and calls me Coach Candace, and I'm like, huh? Like I didn't even know I had international mentees. Okay, thank you, Jesus. But did I ever think I would be that person? No. But did I embody the qualities of someone who would be able to do those things? Yes. I've always been, outspoken, but beyond that, like I worked on my speech. I would perfect my craft in a sense where if I knew I was nervous in front of the camera, people used to see me all the time live on Instagram every single week. That wasn't just to get clients or to talk to people. It was for that comfort in front of the camera because it's like, Candace, you may not think that this is for you. You may not think that you're good enough or anything like that. But if everybody is talking about something that they see on the inside of you, there's some kind of gift. And so I knew enough to know, okay, Candace, if God gives you a gift, steward the gift in a way that you feel like you qualify for. And I didn't feel qualified for the fancy cameras and the lights and stuff like that. I said, you know what? The good Lord then blessed me with this iPhone here, and we're gonna go live on Instagram.
That's right. That's
And
right.
we're gonna talk to the people until we get comfortable.
Come on. Now, you know what's so cool is I remember when you were doing those lives and like me, because I'm just like a personal development nerd. So I'm like, I know why she's really doing this. I'm like, she's
You
answering
saw it.
great questions, and yes, but I know why she's really doing this. But I really appreciate that though, because that is a part of what I referenced in the beginning of our conversation, right? Like actually doing the work. I cannot tell you, Candace, how many people I see on Instagram saying, I'm doing a 30-day this, I'm doing a this posting challenge, and I'm going to start this. And in my mind, I'm like, this ain't lasting more than 3 days. Just know, having seen it, I'm just like, this ain't. So I always am genuinely interested to learn more when I see people genuinely doing it, without the fancy lights, without the, all the team and the stuff, because it just demonstrates demonstrates a becoming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now you mentioned, the example of going live every day to get comfortable, building the disciplines, working on your speech and things like that. What were some other disciplines that helped you kind of grow in your confidence to be prepared for the opportunity when it presents itself?
Ooh, this may sound like out of place, but I promise it makes sense. I kept the promises I made to myself.
Go deeper. You
If
there?
I if I made any kind of promise to myself, I had to keep it. And it would come when you're building discipline. I think a lot of times it's like the New Year resolution thing. Sometimes we're like, I'm gonna lose 50 pounds in 6 days, and it's like you ain't been to the gym ever in your life since they forced you to in high school. Like it's just one of those things where sometimes we set unrealistic expectations, and then when we don't meet said expectations, then we feel like we're a failure. I don't even know why I tried in the first place, when in reality you ain't had to say you was going to lose 50 pounds, friend. We could have just started with 5. And so I embraced that whole, philosophy or whatever. And so I would begin to make promises to myself, and they would start off very small. Candace, you're going to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and you're going to go to the gym. Okay, Candace, you did that. Good job. That's real cute. Now you're going to get up at 5:45 and you're going to get up and go to the gym. Now you're going to get up at 5:30. Now I'm a 5 a.m. gym girly. But at first, I wasn't going to the gym at all. And so I'm saying this to say, very fundamentally, I would make promises to myself, whether that's I'm going to shut off my phone, I'm going to ignore social media for a couple hours, I'm going to lock into my work, I'm going to read my Bible every single night before I go to bed, I'm going to drink water before I go to Dunkin' and buy some coffee. Like just, different things that are very small, but not so small if you think about it. And then once I recognize, well, wait, Candace, I respect myself enough to keep the promises that I make to myself, I started making bigger promises. Like, okay, well, now I challenge you to pay off that $10,000 credit card because why you got it? Like, just, different things like that. Because I set a standard even with my own self that said if I can't say I love myself, I'm out here lying to myself. So if I tell myself something, I'm going to keep that promise to myself, and whatever that is. But I also know myself too, so I'm gonna set the benchmark as something that's realistic, that it may push me a little bit further than maybe the last promise did, but it's not going to overextend me into failure where I begin to resent the person that I'm looking at in the mirror, if that makes sense.
You just said a lot. I need to make
I did.
sure. Wait a minute. Because there's two key things you said that I need to make sure people like emphasize and understand. You said, I respect myself enough to make bigger promises. I think number one, that that just jacked me up in real time because that really is what it's about. Where it's like, hey, it's I respect myself to where, hey, if I say I'm gonna do something, then let's go bigger. But if I'm not doing what I say, then I don't deserve to make a bigger promise to myself. So that was number one, profound. It just leads to speaking standard. Then you said, I can't say I love myself if I keep lying to myself.
Mhm.
My God.
Come on now. People lying to you and just stabbing you in the back and all that, and you believe, okay, well, this person clearly doesn't love me if they continue lying to me. Then here you go lying to yourself. Well, it doesn't make any sense.
Right. Oh my God. So I define that entire thing, at least when I'm coaching somebody, I define that as the discipline of no contradiction, where it's I'm not gonna say one thing and then do another. Like either I'm gonna change what I'm saying or I'm gonna actually do what I'm saying, right? Just one of the two because there just needs to be alignment. How does someone, we'll just say, begin that process of, as you said, keep every promise you say to yourself? Because, you know, I believe I could guess at the answer, but I want to hear you language it because that's hard for some people. You said,
Mhm.
hey, we're going to go to the gym at 6. Okay, cool, we did that. Now we're going to go to the gym at 5:45. Now we're going to the gym at 5:30. Now we're going to go to the gym at 5. Like, how does someone even put all that together? Because that's hard for a lot of people to keep their promises to themselves.
Mhm. Well, one, I think first establishing where it is that you want to go. A lot of times we don't even know the answer to that. But if there's a version of you, I always think like, and I have it written in my binder, first page of my binder. And I just have my name at the top, and there are things that I'm either believing God for. There are things that I see for myself within my life. There are titles that I have, or things that I'm known by, and some of those prayers God has already answered. Some of them are in process. Some of them, may or may not be His will for my life, but there's an image, there's a picture. And so instead of saying, I'm going to, I'm going to make $1 million this year, it's like, okay, well, maybe not all that, not doubting God or anything like that, but maybe not all of that. But if I humanize all these goals and aspirations and all those things, and I water them down to something that I feel is attainable for me, from my own strength, I'm not talking supernatural, we're very much practical. If it makes sense practically, my own strength, I'm gonna set that goal for whatever that is. Deep down, you know what you're capable of doing. Like whatever that thing is. When we're setting those New Year resolutions and we say we're gonna lose 50 pounds in a month, we know good and well when we set that goal that we ain't losing 50 pounds in 30 days. We know we're not. We just do it because we're excited, and and it sounds really good. But when you remove all of that and you're realistic, you'll say, you know what, maybe not 50 pounds, maybe just 5. And then when you hit that 5, you feel so good, and you're like, all right, next month we're doing 7. And that's how it builds. But you can't begin to set those, foundational level goals or make those promises to yourself if you don't truly know yourself. Everything's going to take you back to that solitude of spending time with yourself. I think life is just so noisy and loud between life and career and social media and all of that. There's so many of us who don't sit with ourselves. We don't know who we are.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So you spoke to vision. You spoke to what we call stacking wins of like, hey, just like set the bar at something you know you're gonna hit, so you can just like keep stacking more wins and things like that to start honoring your promise. Candace, to close out our time, I want to ask you this question: what does it cost to be you? So all this wisdom that you're giving us, all the advancements that you have, not just in your professional life, but in your personal life as well, just from that fulfillment aspect. What does it cost to be you?
Mm. You're not going to make me cry. Uh,
Take your time. Take your
what
time.
what does it cost me to be me? But the first word that popped up in my mind when you asked that was comfort. Um, being me has definitely cost me comfort. It has cost me an image of what I thought my life was going to be. Um, I did not think that my life would be what it is right now. Um, it has cost me friendships and, relationships, people who either benefited off of a version of me that was not, the person that God called me to be, the people pleaser, the yes ma'am, the yes, I'll inconvenience myself in order to make your life easier version of me. And also the people who just didn't understand that there's a reason why I have to move the way that I move. And so it's been very uncomfortable. It's been very uncomfortable. But I have a peace in that God loves me, and because he loves me, he's not intentionally let me make her uncomfortable, let me make her life miserable, let me let these people walk out of her life and treat her bad or whatever. I don't believe that God looks at me and says, yeah, she's been through enough, but let me throw a little bit more at her. Like I don't see that. I don't think that God looks at my story and thinks, let me write another chapter of shenanigans. I think that he's been writing my story um as a book that's going to either bless other people, free other people, show people, what, if this young girl could do it, so can I. If she made it through divorce, if she made it through grief, if she, if she did, so can I. And so I'm just embracing that. But it's cost me comfort. It's
Oh.
cost me comfort.
I thank you. I thank you for your transparency, and the reason why I always want to make sure we ask that question is because in these conversations, the practical, tactical mindset shifts and all that, right? It can sound very easy in the moment, but you're able to share these insights because you pay that price consistently. You pay that price of being uncomfortable often. And I think, especially when it's said and done with the work you're already doing, like you said, you're already impacting hundreds of lives, whether it's in a field of, agents, but I know that you're helping people personally as well reach that same place of fulfillment. So, you know, I will say thank you for paying that price. Because we need more examples of not just people being successful, but people being transparent in the sense of I'm successful, but here's what it costs me, and I'm okay with paying that price because I recognize, we'll call it the greater good. I recognize, just the call that's on my life. And so I think it's just relevant that people hear, hey, all the amazing things that you're doing and you're just getting started. I already see it, I know it, and I believe it, and I'm in faith with you. Uh, but people need to know that whether they watch this episode now or they watch it 10 years from now and they're like, man, Candace Solomon, she's all the way up there, they can go back to this and say, oh no, it cost her something. So there's no doubt as to how you got where you got. And and that just brings us full circle to yourself because you got still. You know yourself. You allowed yourself to, get clear on the vision that you had in a way that was aligned with who God created you to be. And you basically operated from that place, despite fear, pressure, all that other type of stuff. to become. And so I thank you. I truly, truly do. Before we hop off, Candace, how can people connect with you? Where can they find you? Just all the things.
Oh man, I am on most social media platforms, just as my name at Candace Solomon. Some of them have a little underscore at the end, some of them don't. But yeah,
All
that's
right.
pretty
Excellent.
much it.
Well, listen, I will make sure that all her information, if you want to connect with Candace, is in the description link below. But I pray that you got value out of this conversation. And if you did, I just have one favor. I need you to share this with one other person that you know to simply be a blessing to them. Because in the same way this blessed you, you have an opportunity to be a blessing to somebody else. So with that all being said, we'll see you on the next episode. Always remember, your dream is possible as long as you're willing to grow for it. Have a good one.